Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Wills, your host. Real excited about tonight's show. We have some great people. I got the pleasure of meeting both of them. Roger, I met last year in MUFON out in Texas. We hung out together, had a good time. And Irene, I met back in 2019 at the UFO Congress and hung out there with her and had a great time with her as well. And we've been in touch all these years. She actually introduced me to Ross Coldhart and got him on the show in the beginning. So I appreciate all that she has done. Just a couple of things. First of all, I made a decision. I'm going to be at the Contact. My producer, Donna, and I are going to be at the Contact in the desert this year. We decided to bite the bullet and go out there. I was trying to get out to do a live podcast from there. And I did. I looked at my email. I did contact all the way back in July. But anyway, I missed it somehow, or they missed me or whatever, but I'm still going to be out there and I'd love to hang out. If you're going to be there, please let me know. You can actually, we may try to put together a live podcast there somehow. And it's Martin at podcastufo.com. If you're going to be there, it'd be great to hang out. Also, at the first few days of April, I'm going to be speaking and podcasting also in California, Northern California, Burlingame at the UFO Con out there. I'm going to be one of the speakers plus podcasting there, and that's for April 4th, 5th, and 6th in Burlingame, UFO Con. So check that out. So anyway, our blog this week from Charles Lear is a lesser-known Australian UFO encounter from 1971. Actually, both of my guests are very familiar with this. It's not lesser known there, and I'm going to probably have them talk about it a little bit. It's an interesting case, but it is definitely lesser known here in the States. So we will be talking about that and also about Westall. I'm going to be playing a trailer on that at some point, and that happened back in 1966. So that's coming right up on a, what is that, 60 year? I think that's coming up next year. 1966. So there's going to be a big event there. There's going to be films. Again, we're going to be talking about that. But both of these guests had come to the United States and researched some crash sites. So we have a lot to talk about in this hour coming up. And I'm going to bring them in. Here's Roger. Here's Irene. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Martin.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you on. Roger, we did a person-to-person interview out in Texas, but Irene, I think you've been on a couple of times, haven't you, Irene, over the years?
Yes,
yeah.
Once with Ross, a couple of times. Oh, one for your anniversary as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, when I had the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
God, it won't be long. It's going to be 15. I can't believe it. And
how do you do it, Martin?
Oh, I love doing it.
You're relentless. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I love doing it. It's still a mystery. I mean, I don't know why, you talk to the average person out there and they say, what, UFOs? And to me, it's just such an amazing mystery to look at and so much fun. And the people you meet, I mean, my life has totally changed just from looking at this topic. And it's not what I thought in the very beginning. I thought, oh my God, after I had my UFO sighting, I thought, who's, I'm going to look on YouTube here. Well, that guy sounds kind of normal, and this person doesn't seem. I don't see any tinfoil hats, and oh, this guy's a scientist. This guy's a nuclear physicist. So yeah, I think a lot of people are missing out that think there's nothing to this mystery.
I guess the crazies are the ones that the mainstream media focus on, and there are crazies in every field. So
that's true. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. Let's do a little quick introduction. We'll start with you, Roger. Why don't you? I know that some people have watched you on my show before, but if you would, your background and quickly and how you got interested in the topic, then we'll go to Irene. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure, Martin. So I'm a personal experiencer, so it means that I've seen a UAP or UFO. I experienced that when I was in my teenage years. On my parents' property, and that's how I got interested in UFOs, and read a lot of books in the decades leading up to a serious attempt at research, and then became involved in MUFON as a field investigator, and then quickly got promoted to national director, and that's what position I hold at the moment. I'm also an associate member of the SCU, and done a few podcasts and got involved with the media at one stage. So, yeah. That's me in a nutshell. I'm also a neuroscientist. I did a PhD, natural science degree at Sydney University, and a PhD in neuroscience later on. And I'm actually a teacher right now, teaching molecular biology, statistics, and anatomy and physiology. So
now, when you're using your like science mind, do you approach this topic differently? Do you believe?
Not really. I take this topic at a serious scientific level. So I look at I love physical evidence, and that's mainly what I'm looking for. Whether it be a landing of a craft or a piece of metal, which we've looked at several bits of pieces of alleged craft. I go to crash sites to see if there's anything that I can pick up or anything that's unusual there. And also with cattle mutilations, I've been involved in cattle mutilations where I've actually got tissue from cattle and analysed it in the lab using histological techniques. So I look at it purely as a nuts and bolts thing. I'm not that much into the woo, but some people are trying to get me there.
So let me just ask you this. So there's actually cattle mutilations in Australia.
Correct. Yep.
Wow. I don't know why. I just didn't know that. I mean, how common is that?
It's not that common, but we do find a lot of mutilations in central southern Queensland, which is the state that's up above New South Wales, and we have had mutilations of sheep. We've had mutilations of kangaroos.
Wow.
So, yeah, it occurs worldwide. I mean, I think the audience don't really realise that it's not just occurring in the States. It's occurring in the UK. It's occurring in Europe, in South America, in Australia, everywhere. And it's quite a bizarre. Wow. It's something that we haven't worked out exactly what is occurring because the cuts are so precise, and some of the animals are found with broken bones, so they might have been dropped from a great height, and usually they're exsanguinated, which means that they've got no blood in them, and they've got sometimes organs missing with no visible hole to take them out of, like the brain or whatever. It's
really? Wow. So I don't know how many people know this, but Snippy the horse. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, sure.
Snippy the horse is basically the first mutilation, and rightly named Snippy. So, but that was I can't remember what year that was, but that was
1967.
Oh, so you even know that?
And her name was she was an Appaloosa, and she was actually, it was one of the first books I read as a teenager. But basically, she was called Lady. But her entire head was defleshed of tissue, and just the skeleton was left. So it was a really bizarre. It went viral worldwide. That news. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, very interesting. So now it's your turn, Irene. Let's hear a little bit about you. I know, again, you've been on a few times, so people know you mostly, but for the new person.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess you and I met in 2019 at the Phoenix conference. Before that, I was not interested in UFOs. I think I've said this on your show before. I thought people that were interested in them were a little bit crazy, or a lot crazy, until I moved cities and into a job where I was introduced to the Westall incident, where I think there was 300 people total witnessed a flying saucer, of which I couldn't really argue with that as a skeptic or a debunking mind, that 300 people ranging from school children to adults in the 1960s could not have been on drugs or crazy. So I became a little bit obsessed with this case, and it was my introduction into the UFO world. I did unearthed some. I did a Google. I remember being very disturbed by this at some point, and doing a Google search on is there such thing as a scientific investigation into UFOs, and discovered Keith Basterfield. He's actually from my home state of South Australia, who's a highly regarded international researcher who is very nuts and bolts, as Roger puts it, very cut and dried, and investigates cases. I think in his background, he was a quality assurance officer for the government. So he's very much has a scientific approach rather than approach looking at the woo, even though he has covered in his blog cases which do involve a lot of high strangeness. So I was quite shocked at the time to know that there was somebody covering, close to me, covering very interesting and very bizarre cases, which gave me a state of what Diana Pasolka calls ontological shock.
Yeah.
I consider myself not so much a UFO person, but an outsider looking in. My background's in design. I work in marketing. I work for a structural engineering company. So I sort of dip my toe in every now and then. My focus is on the Westall case, basically, and bringing this information to the people about the case, and the fact that it's an unsolved mystery that's been going on. Well, it will be 60 years next year, and nothing much has been uncovered. It was great that Rosie Batty and Shane Ryan brought all the witnesses together on the 40th anniversary to create Westall, a suburban UFO mystery, that the movie that brought to light the details of the case. And since then, the witnesses and I have been meeting up yearly to just keep in touch and keep the case alive, basically, in the hope that something will emerge. Somebody somewhere will have a deathbed confession about it, perhaps. And on that note, on one of the meetings we had together at a pub, they did an impromptu demonstration, and I had to quickly whip out my phone camera to take a video of it to show the motion of the shape of the saucer. So if we could show a quick clip of that, if you don't
Sure,
mind.
you bet. And I also want to get back to Keith Bestfield, however you say his name, in a minute. But yeah, we'll show this right now.
I was hovering on the ground like that, just above the ground, probably about, no, it's that low, because I thought it was on the ground actually, so it was probably pretty low. And then raised up very slowly, and then turned on its side. I was hovering.
I love that, the double saucers and the whole motion and everything. Yeah, I recognize her right away, the lady with the dark hair right away from
Terry
all the
Peck.
films. Yeah. So what I wanted to mention about Keith, was he, I may have this totally wrong, but somewhere in my head is sticking that he was the one that uncovered the Wilson document? Is that?
No, that's James Rigney.
Oh, okay.
friend James Rigney.
He's from Australia though, right?
Yeah, he was on the trip with us. We went on a trip again. We did this for the second time, but Roger joined us for the first time. So back in 2019, when I met you, Martin, we did the conference, and then we did a road trip visiting Roswell and Socorro, so the famous UFO sites of the USA. And so we did that again with a little bit of a difference. We did that last year, and I think we're hoping to talk a little bit about, and Roger has delved into these cases deeply, and I think it was a thrill for him to actually go to the sites that he'd been reading about for decades. Isn't that right,
Yep.
Roger?
That's correct, yeah.
So, so that was James Rigney that was with us on the trip. He was like our team captain, showing us around.
So did I meet him? Was he in that group?
Yes, you did. You met us when you met us all together, like Team Aussie, over in the conference in 2019. I think you met him first, actually. Yeah.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah.
Boy, that was that Wilson. I've gone back and forth in my mind whether that's right. I mean, it's. I think more people are thinking that it might be right than than wrong, but I don't know. I'm still
Well,
on the
the
fence about it.
provenance is really interesting because I was with him through the journey of the provenance of the document, and I was the first one he showed it to, and I remember him wanting to get to the spaceman, his friend, who had the document, who was a friend of Edgar Mitchell's, and they were all in a space club together. And the guy called the spaceman, who was quite close to Edgar, I think the family had contacted him upon Edgar's death and said, "We've got some stuff here, of Edgar's, and we know that you were close. Would you like us to send it over? Because otherwise we'll just burn it." And he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it." And so he contacted James, and he said, "I've got some of Edgar's stuff. It's sitting in my garage or basement or wherever he had it stashed." And he said, "Would you like to come and have a look through it? I don't have time," sort of thing. And then eventually I remember nagging James, saying, "When are you going to go?" He had to travel north into New South Wales, I think it was, into a country town. And he was running a busy architectural practice at the time, James was, and he was trying to allocate a moment to get away and drive up to see his friend. So I kept on nagging and saying, "When are you going to see it?" We didn't want anything to happen to the documents in between times. And we wanted, I really was keen to know if there was anything in it. And then sometime later, he rang me and he said, "Guess what? I'm at the office. I found a document. Would you like to come over and have a look at it with me? See what you think?" So I whipped around. I actually lived very close to where he was working, and we were in his empty office at night time, looking through the document, thinking, who are these people? We knew Eric Davis, but we're looking at who's Admiral Tom Wilson. So we were Googling him because we had no idea who he was. And he said, yeah, it was in just a bunch of papers, a whole lot of letters, and this document. And I mean, thinking, who could have planted it? Why would anybody plant it? Why would they go to great lengths to plant it in a bunch of documents in Australia? Or did they plant it before, when they were cleaning out Edgar Mitchell's house? I don't know what the purpose of that would be and what it would achieve, but I don't know. To me, it seems unlikely that it's a fake. I mean, yeah, given the documents that it was in. It's like when people have their personal admin and they have a whole lot of papers and they get a letter or something and they just stash it somewhere. Imagine that's just what it was, that he'd received these minutes or, minutes of a meeting, and this transcript was with it. So if you read Jacques Vallée's diaries, he illustrates the incidents all around that. And I'm a keen fan of Jacques Vallée, and I've read all of his diaries. And so seeing where the Wilson dot, where that actual dot fits in, it does actually, if you read the diaries, it does fit into the historical lineage of events. I guess I hope I've explained that.
Wow. Well, I have Josh coming up on the 25th here. I'll try to fire that at him. And by the way, I should say this, next week we have Dr. John Blitch, and Ross Coldhart interviewed him on, I think it was News Nation, perhaps, or maybe it was on that other show that he does. But anyway, so Blitch is on next week. Should be a great show. So let's see. Do you want to let's talk quickly about the Westall, and then we'll get into some other things, because for the person. Well, first of all, I think I'm going to just run this quick clip here, and then we'll talk about it. Let's see. Afterwards. Hang on. Okay, here we go.
The 6th of April 1966 started just like any other day in the city of Melbourne. Then something very strange appeared in the sky above the suburb of Westall. It hasn't been explained to this day.
This boy come running in and say, Mr. Greenwood, there's these things in the sky, there's these things in the sky. We looked up and we just saw this saucer type thing taking off.
It wasn't a plane, it wasn't a balloon, it was nothing like that.
A lot of the kids took off towards where it seemed to go.
All the students were just running all over the place, hysterical.
Westall High School as a teaching situation ceased.
My girlfriend and I sat on the fence, climbed the fence, the school boundary, and we were crying, thinking it was the end of the world.
Richard.
Martin, you're muted.
I can't hear you.
I unmuted everyone else
Oh.
but me. Yeah. So yes, but anyway, so that's the incident. Now that intrigued me right away. Hang on just a second. I think something is happening. Yeah, that intrigued me right away when I first saw that. There's some great documentaries out there on that. I've had Shane Ryan on a few times. Great guy, and I'm glad that he's kept that alive and done all the work that he has on that. But in a nutshell, because there's some, I don't want to say controversy, but there was something involved in where there was pictures taken and maybe the camera taken away, or I don't know which one of you want to tackle the story.
Do you know
I'll leave
much
it to
about
Irene.
that? Okay.
I'll leave it to you, Irene.
So
You're the expert.
there were a few teachers that came running out of the building. There was one lady, I don't know whether she was a science teacher. No, I think it was Andrew Greenwald, who's one of the main witnesses, who's now passed away. He was a science teacher, and another teacher, I can't remember what she taught, doesn't matter. She had a camera and she took photographs. And once the military came later on, they took the camera. I think they took the camera, or did they take the film in the camera? But anyway, the witnesses will tell us more about that. But yeah, certainly there was photography taken, which was removed. There was also, while Shane, you'll see in the documentary, while Shane was searching around for old footage that the media may have taken, not actually of the flying saucers, but of the school, and doing a report. I think a few TV stations came down, and there was certainly a couple of newspapers that attended. But I think it was at Channel 7, he was looking around the archives, and the film canister that contained the report on Westall at the time was empty. Now, Ross has said that this is not unusual in media. People lose film regularly. So, but still, it was, it is intriguing that that particular film on that particular topic went missing. Yeah, and as to a missing person, there was allegedly a missing person in this case. There was a lady called Tanya who was with Terry and another girl, who fainted at the scene, and she was taken away in an ambulance. And then the story goes that her school colleagues knocked on her door following the incident and were told that nobody by that name lived there. Ross did find Tanya and interview her, and she gave her version of events where they had moved away because I think her family were Yugoslavian, or they had come from an Eastern Bloc country, and this is during the Cold War. 1966 was during the Cold War, so I think they were sensitive to being questioned by the government and didn't want any trouble, perhaps. Intriguingly, the Westall witnesses are not sure that this is the right Tanya, which is interesting. I'd like to find out a little bit more about that. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, but Ross has done due diligence and good background checking, as he should, as a very experienced investigative journalist. So he seems in no doubt that the Tanya he has unearthed is the correct Tanya. So let's watch this space.
Right. And so would you consider, is that like Australians Roswell? You know what I mean? Is that the biggest case, would you say, in Australia?
Yeah. Do you think so, Roger? It's the biggest known case with the most number of witnesses.
Well, probably apart from the Valentich case and
oh yes,
the Knowles incident on the Nullarbor. I think, yeah, probably because there's just multiple witnesses, and unfortunately, there was trace evidence. I think there were sort of like landing marks found at the Grange, I think, and although some people say there were, some people say there wasn't. So it's a little bit controversial, but
There were a lot of witnesses that did report seeing the landing marks, and also there were a brother and sister that snuck on afterwards and witnessed the military running over it with Geiger counters, or what looked like Geiger counters, and then actually destroying the grass where the landing marks were. So I guess some people may have not seen any trace of anything because it had been removed. So that's quite controversial.
The Kelly Cahill case also is fairly internationally known. That was an encounter that a lady had when she was driving and stopped, and a craft had landed and the occupants had come outside.
Yes. I want to talk about that because I think that's a fascinating case. She's very believable. I've seen her interviewed before. Can you just basically say that more, elaborate on that a little more?
So basically, and I could get a few things wrong because I'm not an expert on Westall or Kelly Cahill, but she was driving along with her husband, I believe, in the car. Is that correct, Irene?
Actually, I did read her book.
Oh, you did? You have?
I did read her book. So she
Maybe you
was
should
going to a barbecue, or coming back from a barbecue. No, I think they were going to a barbecue. So she was driving along with her husband. It's occurred in what is now an outer suburb of Melbourne, but it was actually an area of countryside, and they were heading towards a country area where they were meeting their friends in their home for a barbecue, and it was dark, and they saw to the left of the car what looked like a house in an empty paddock, and they thought that was unusual. And it had it was a craft that had landed, and it was the size of the house. It was extremely well lit. I think another car had stopped. They decided to stop and go and have a look at it, so they got out of the car and walked towards it. And then there was a horrible incident where she felt that she and her husband were being dragged by these entities into the craft. There was missing time. She had marks on her body. This is a very quick, brief description of what was very involved, a lot of incidents. John Orcatur, I think. Was John Orcatur involved in investigating this one as well,
yes.
Roger? He did find the other witnesses who did not want to speak publicly about it. We don't know what actually they had to report, but there were other witnesses to Kelly and her husband. Kelly and her husband eventually split up, and I don't think he wanted to talk about it. It was clearly very traumatizing for her. She had, I think, she had issues with, women's problems after having she had some sort of infection in her uterus or something like that after having being probed or having something pushed into her, and she had some markings left over. So it was a classic abduction, and the usual thing that is reported when I think through the 90s there were a lot of abductions. Is that right, Martin? You know more about this.
Abductions? You mean?
Yeah, abductions where women had reported being abducted and had inserted into their abdomens, and I think theirs seemed to be a classic report of that kind of thing. But what really went on, we don't know. It was very who was behind it, whether it was aliens or whether it was something else, we don't know who was behind it. She did. Yeah. What was intriguing is she did report that the entities spoke to each other, and it sounded very human. Like, I think something like they had an English accent or something very strange that didn't fit in with the usual abduction story. There are a few points that I thought, well, this sounds very odd.
Yeah, that's kind of funny you mention that, because I've often wondered, like, when people think they hear like telepathy, do they hear an accent? I've thought of those type of things, or, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
she heard them speak, and it was a terrifying abduction of some kind. Her husband can attest to it, but won't. She did the circuit of going to UFO conferences, and she consistently told the story in the same way as the Westall witnesses do. There was no change to the story from if you watch her interviews. But then now she won't talk about it at all. She's still living in Victoria somewhere. She's not associated with the UFO scene whatsoever. And I've no doubt whatever happened was very traumatizing and odd and life-changing, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So here in the United States, we have a lot of, the Indigenous Native Americans will talk about star people. And I'm wondering, I don't believe I've ever asked you this, Irene or Roger, but do the Aborigines have any stories of what they consider like star people? Or, I mean, do they have, I know that a lot of theirs was oral history, a lot like
I can't talk to that personally, but we do have a friend who's an archaeologist, Josh York, he's actually making a study of that in his PhD, of the connection between star people and Indigenous Australians. And he's, I would love to have him interviewed, but I don't think he's ready at the moment. I think he wants to finish his studies. But he's a very articulate young man who knows a lot about archaeology and knows he works with the Indigenous people for a living as a consultant. I'll see if I can dig up some more about that topic. But I personally can't speak to it. Roger, what do you know?
Not much. I haven't really looked at the Indigenous population in terms of what their past experiences have been. I'm sure there are drawings on rock faces and whatever that that depict some form of contact in the past, but no, I haven't really got into that. It's very hard to speak to someone. I mean, they're sort of like in remote areas, and basically, it's difficult to get to someone to go to a tribal elder that still remembers all this stuff and was involved in it. So I'm very sketchy on the subject. Sorry.
Well, Australia is laid out. It's the population's along the coast. I mean, it is here. We're concentrated on the coast here in the United States, but in Australia, it's really concentrated on the coast. And then you have all this open land, which is really quite amazing. But also you just wonder, if people have seen something there, for thousands of years. Who knows? I mean,
apparently, yes. Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Roger. Someone wants to know, when you earlier you were talking about the kangaroo, so that they basically want to know, is it as common with the kangaroo mutilations as you would say it is here with the cow mutilations?
No, it's not. I've only known of one kangaroo mutilation.
Oh, I see.
Which was taken. There was a photograph taken of it, and it had the classic jaw swipe, which is just the tissue around the cheek taken out, and anal coring, and I'm not sure whether the blood was exsanguinated or not, but there's photographs of it. For some strange reason, I've lost the photographs of my old computer, but not that common as far as I'm aware. People don't really report them. This was sort of like an incident where someone was driving on the road and they found a kangaroo on the road and they thought it was hit by a car. But there were no broken bones and it wasn't hit by a car. They found out and they pulled it off the road and then found the mutilations on it. So it's just a coincidence that somebody came across it. But there have been incidents of sheep being mutilated, but cows are the most common form of animal mutilation, I think, found in Australia, and they're mainly, as I said before, they're central southern Queensland. I've contacted a few farmers there, one that's in fairly consistent contact with me about his property, which he's leasing out, which is about 30,000 acres. So they're massive properties. They're very remote areas where they're mutilated, and they're the classic mutilations. So they're almost mirroring what's happening in the United States and other areas with the type of surgical incisions that are taken and the circumstances, etc.
Someone at Twitter just posted this Gosford glyphs. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I haven't been there, but I'm of the opinion. I know that a couple of friends of mine have been there, and I don't think they're. I don't think they're ancient. I think it's a bit of a hoax, but the hoax was done quite a while ago in the 1800s. But yeah, I don't believe it. Sorry.
How about that? So when I first started the show, I started talking about the blog that was this week back in the Australian encounter from 1971, and what is it called? That UFO encounter on Nullarbor Plain.
The Knowles case.
Nullarbor Plain, yeah.
Nullarbor
However
Plain,
you say
yeah.
that.
The Knowles.
So-
We know it as a Knowles case.
Oh, okay. So do either one of you want to tackle that?
Well, it was many years ago when I was a kid. It was very controversial on mainstream media on a show run by Darren Hinch, who is a controversial and popular journalist who ran an evening show. And, he was grilled the family mercilessly about this case. He gave them a thorough... Do you remember that, Roger? His thorough grilling of the Knowles family?
He wasn't the only one to have interviewed the family. So there was a mother and her, I think, 3 sons. So I think she might have been divorced or whatever, but they were traveling across the Nullarbor. Sorry, am I stealing this story from you, Irene?
No, let's tag team it. Yeah.
Basically, an object like an egg-shaped craft had actually hovered over their car, if I'm getting this right, and actually attached itself to the car, lifted the car up, let the car go, and the car hit the road. And I think the car developed 2 flat tires on either side, on one side, sorry. The car, then obviously they stopped the car. There were witnesses. I think there was a guy in a semi-trailer that was traveling in the opposite direction and actually saw the incident happen, and he was interviewed as well, I believe. But there was some analysis. So apparently when the car was lifted, I think the mother or one of the sons had put their hand on top of the roof to just check to see what on earth was going on, and what is actually what's up there. And they had this strange feeling in the car when it was being lifted, and basically they did an analysis. I think there was some scientific analysis on the dust and debris that was left on the vehicle, but at that time, and I think it was in the 1980s, I believe it was. You've got it as 1971, but I'm not sure whether that.
Yeah, I saw
correct.
later in the article it does mention 1988.
Yeah, 1988. Yeah. So basically, they did some analysis in '88, and due to the restrictions on the abilities of the electron microscopes that they had, we do energy dispersive X-ray microanalysis now, and there's some very accurate techniques and new techniques that we can use. But at the time, they didn't find any anomalous material on the car. But the family were fairly credible in terms of, when they were being interviewed, they seemed like they'd experienced something, whether it was an extraterrestrial craft that actually interacted with the car or not, it's another matter. But there was nothing anomalous found at the time.
Yeah. So what do you...
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to say quickly that they did experience a slowing down of time when the object was on top of the car. They said that it was very strange and that their voices had all sounded strange and as though time had slowed. So that was quite odd. And yeah, I think speaking to Keith Basfield about the case as well, I'm not sure what his involvement was, but he I had lunch with him a few years ago in Adelaide, and he said that there was nothing anomalous physically that was found on investigation. But just wanted to say, I wonder if it was the same egg that Jake Barber and his crew managed to capture.
Because it's egg-shaped, yeah. So, but that supposedly that particular video did not come from something that Jake was doing. I don't know.
No,
that,
I'm just making
that was
a joke.
another video from someone else. Supposedly,
I'm just making, a pesky,
I don't know.
There's clearly a pesky egg zipping around the globe, harassing people for decades. So, just hoping.
Yeah.
They managed to.
So this is a question someone said: did that happen near Water Creek River or cave?
It didn't, but there's the Gosford incident which happened in water and the reservoir. Do you know about this case, Roger? That's up your end in New South Wales. There was many witnesses. I think could have been 100 witnesses that saw a craft coming into. I think was it a reservoir or a lake around there? Roger, do you know this?
Yeah,
water.
I do know about the incident, but I'm very sketchy on the details because I've only just seen a documentary about it several years ago. And but yes, there was a craft that was witnessed by multiple people at different times as it was traveling. So, yeah.
But just to answer your question, around the Nullarbor, there's no water. It's a big, big desert plain. So there's no caves, no water that we know of, just flat desert dirt.
So getting back to the egg shape and all that stuff. So Ross has been very busy, as you see, and with all this stuff that's coming out. And what is it? And Jake Barber and all that. There's a lot of people trying to, say there's nothing to it. I don't know. What to believe these days on anything. I like to say I have an open mind and like to see what happens down the road. So I'm going to ask, what are either one of you want to tell me your opinion of what you think is going on with all this?
Roger.
You're on the hot seat. Yeah.
I'm on the hot seat. It's MUFON did an analysis and they're a bit critical of the video. I'm not sure whether I agree or disagree. All I can say is that basically, I suppose once we get more information, I mean, having a video of an actual, alleged spacecraft that's being, retrieved is absolutely like groundbreaking and something that has never happened before. So I think if it's real, it's paradigm shifting. It's amazing. But with every video and I've analyzed many videos and photographs through MUFON, you've got to be the devil's advocate, and you've got to go through all the possibilities that of what it could be. And once we establish that, once it's gone through the ringer, and we can actually say that, we can't fault this video, then we can say that, okay, well, if we can't fault it and it must be real, we just got to come to that hypothesis until someone else comes along and says, no, I've looked at the metadata and it's not right, or whatever. So I'm sitting on the fence at the moment. So
that's healthy, I think. I mean, but it's the whole story is quite remarkable. When they talk about the psionic connection, there's something to that, because I've heard this type of situation for so long, but it is quite remarkable. And it'd be really interesting to see what happens over the next year with all this stuff. And I finally get to meet Ross coming up at Contact in the Desert. So I just heard he's going to be there. So that'll be great. But so anyway, he has these people that he's interviewed, and I have one of them coming up next week. Dr. Blitch is going to be on it, but but their stories are quite remarkable. And I know that in this particular case, according to Ross himself, he did research on this person, on Jake Barber, for I think it was up to 2 years. So it's not like he's like putting them out there real quickly and without, doing a deep dive into their background and them being what they say they are. So, but I mean, it must feel kind of special for you to be from little Australia with this incredible journalist that's coming up with all this, out with all this stuff and really kind of moving the needle.
Yeah, we're very proud of our Ross,
Yeah.
and the community supports him as much as we can, and with helping him with any information or pointing him to the right direction. Or we remember him coming into this field being quite green and an open book, and James and he had a lot of time together where James was kind of mentoring him in this field. So
James Fox?
James Rigney.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rigney. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I was Ross told me he had listened to my show for like 3 years, which is pretty amazing. So I mean, he was just trying to find little tidbits and things out there, about the subject. Now it's his show with Bryce Sable's pretty solid. I really enjoy listening to that. So yeah. So let's see. We've got about a little less than 10 minutes here. And so I guess what I'd like to ask either one of you, if you have like a favorite interesting case that we haven't talked about yet in Australia. Wait, we were supposed to talk about crash.
I think we should talk about Roger's fascination with these cases and his chance to visit these various crash sites.
That's right. We meant to talk about that. So yeah, let's dig into that, Roger.
So okay, so we've got less than 10 minutes, but I did a talk on this recently, and it took 3 hours. But we went to so basically Irene, James Rigney, and myself, and a couple of other researchers had gone to the States. We'd planned going on a road trip. We turned it into a UFO crash site road trip. So we went first of all to the Contact in the Desert meeting last year, which we really enjoyed, and after that we went to Area 51. Back down through to Kingman, Arizona, where we went to the food tank crash site. So we had a look around there. So this is the Kingman UFO crash that happened in '53. And then from then on, we went to Socorro, where we went to the landing site with Lonnie Zamora. And from there on, we actually went to the Corona debris field, which is the Roswell incident. From there on, we went to what was that? I'm missing one. Aztec. So we went to the alleged Aztec crash site in New Mexico, which was difficult to find, but we actually found it. A lot of these places are very, very deserted, very desolate, dry. Lots of rattlesnakes and tarantulas around, and very difficult to get to. If you don't know what you're doing, you've got to really plan the trip properly to actually get to the crash site. But the crash sites were amazing. I was absolutely tickled pink about being there, and we found things which we didn't expect as well. At the Kingman crash site, we found some rocks that were just in a place where the actual spacecraft had actually allegedly crashed, and they were blackened on top. And later I found out that Harry Drew, who was one of the initial investigators of Kingman, said that the crash, that the saucer clipped a butte and then landed, dug into the earth and lifted these rocks up. And we actually were at the site where these rocks were just out of place in an area which we wouldn't expect, and they were blackened on top. And that could be because the craft had crashed there and lifted these rocks up out of the soil. Also in Aztec, we found we actually went to the landing site where we found at the actual landing site, we found some junipers that were actually damaged, that were quite old, and I took some film of it, and basically used AI to determine whether AI thought that something had landed on and twisted that juniper tree, and it said that it could well have been something. And these junipers, they can live for quite some time, like hundreds of years. So it's a possibility that tree, underwent some damage. We also went to the Corona debris field, which is the Roswell Incident, and the Roswell Museum. And later on, I went back to Dallas after we came back to Australia for the International MUFON Symposium, and met you, Martin. And so we went. We were planning on going to Aurora. You didn't go, but I actually met up with a crowd who went to the Aurora, Texas crash site, and we actually went to the well, which we got into a bit of trouble on doing. But we were caught at there, on private property. But basically, we basically went to the cemetery as well, where we had a look at the site where the actual alleged alien was buried, and the headstone which had been removed. So we had a good time. It was great. I recommend anyone doing this tour. We're from Australia, so we had to travel quite a long way to do this. So there's no excuse for anyone that's actually born and bred in the United States.
That's right. Now, the Aztec, isn't that like very, very remote?
It is. It's
like you can only get there by horse or something, or
no, you can get there by car. It's just that they're dirt roads. So once you get onto the, I can't remember the name. It's the R7700 or something like that, or 200. There's a road which you get off when you get out of Socorro, and basically that'll take you to the Hart Canyon, which is an area where they have oil fields. And basically, all the roads are dirt roads there, and a lot of them are not posted. So you've got to virtually guess where you're going in terms of. And we overshot the site, and then we had to turn back. So it took us a long time to actually find the. There's a little turnoff that you do where you can park your car. There's a little cleared area, and then there's a fence that you walk up to. You remember, Irene, we walked past the fence and we walked to the other side of the road. Or you don't. Once you get to the fence, you turn left, and then you go down, and there's a concrete slab that was actually there since the 40s, which was allegedly used to support a leg of a crane, which actually lifted the craft in 3 pieces, apparently, or 3 or 4 pieces. So they're very difficult to get to, and very difficult to get to. You've got to plan it really well. I think James did an amazing job of planning the trip. This is James Rigney, who went with us. Basically, he did a lot of background work, and we both, had to research the history and everything. So I wouldn't go out there without carefully planning the trip, and do one at a time, maybe.
Wow, that sounds like a really exciting time to do all that. Yeah.
So we're thinking of we're planning to have Roger over to Melbourne and do a presentation on the trip. So Roger's got lots of photos and video that he's already shared with in Sydney. So we're going to bring him to Melbourne. So watch closeencountersaustralia.net. Perhaps I'll send you a link later on once we've organised that event as well, if you don't mind, Martin, for your viewers.
Right. And so when is the anniversary to the Westall?
Well, the anniversary for the 59th is April 6, 1966 was the day it happened. So we usually meet up close to April 6 on a weekend. So I'm just trying to think, is it a Sunday this year? Next year we will organise the big event. So that's still a work in progress as to what that will be, and hopefully a film launch or a film festival perhaps. But once again, we'll have details of that at the Close Encounters Australia website once that is ready.
Excellent. Now, do either one of you participate, like interact with people? I mean, I'm really putting you on the spot, but I mean, if you'd like to put out there, like a Facebook page or anything that you're involved in for people to reach out to you? Do you like people to reach out to you when it comes to this topic?
Well, for our events, for our speakers, which we don't do very often, and we just save it for the good ones like Ross and Roger, closeencountersaustralia.net.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's been a real pleasure having you both on, and great to see you both again. And hopefully our paths will meet if you're ever come to the States again. I don't know if I'll ever make it to Australia. Sure would love to someday. It's always been a dream.
I'd love to have you here, Martin.
Yeah, and what's the weather like that? We've got just a minute
Oh,
here.
it's warm.
It's nice now. It's very sunny and clear here and where I am.
Yeah,
Right.
well, it's
We have
beautiful.
very mild weather.
Yeah, it's the end of summer. It's actually going into autumn, but we still have some warm summer weather at the moment. It's really nice.
No fires. I remember those terrible fires a few years ago. That it's been
I
okay
think
this
every
time.
year we have fires,
Yep.
but they vary in intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, excellent. So again, we'll be back with Dr. John Blitch next week. And I want to thank you both so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you both on and to see you both again. And
Thanks, Martin.
we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yep.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
All right.
Lovely to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky, and we'll see you next week.